This is a paid advertisement. Attention metrics are part of the zeitgeist, and for good reason. The industry needs a better quality measure than viewability. According to the IAB, 90% of advertisers plan to use attention metrics this year, so there's a good chance they're on your radar. If you're part of this forward-thinking majority, it's time to familiarize yourself with the Adelaide's AU. Endorsed by Adweek as the attention economy's most widely recognized metric, AU is available in nearly every DSP, SSP, and ad network. Learn more at AdelaideMetrics.com. That's AdelaideMetrics.com. Welcome to the Marketecture podcast. This is Ari Paparo. I'm joined today by Eric Franchi and Dave Clark, the new CEO of TripleLift, formerly head of Freewheel, formerly president of Weather Channel, the amazing resume, been around the block, formerly my boss at Freewheel, so he has that distinction and survived it. Dave, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm great. I'm very excited to talk to you about your new job and things. First, just some housekeeping. I wanted to let everyone know there's a really interesting interview on Marketecture TV with BidSwitch. They have a new product out called LightSwitch, which is like a traffic shaping product, and it's interesting for anyone in sort of the DSP, SSP business. Also, wanted to let people know, a lot of people are not aware that Marketecture TV has monthly subscriptions now. Originally, when we launched, it was only annual. So if your credit limit at your company is a little lower, do the monthly subscription. It's definitely worth it. All right, let's jump in. So Dave, congrats on the new job. What is TripleLift nowadays?
Well, it's funny because, I've always admired TripleLift. So it's funny that you say nowadays, because there's been so much change in the space. And I think TripleLift is an SSP. Let's start there. But as I got to learn sort of details of the company, it's a different kind of SSP. The sort of heritage of the company of TripleLift is native advertising. The founders going back 10 years, sort of, a classic sort of entrepreneur founder. You may have crossed paths with them.
Yeah, I know them really well.
Yeah, we're both Nexus. Yeah, brilliant guys, Eric Berry and Aaron Lewin and Sean Zachariah. They had this view that just standard IAB banner ads were not effective and really not serving anybody, and they wanted to kind of create better advertising, and they really leaned in. And I think we're like really an early pioneer in native advertising and kind of created the category, and in particular figured out, native advertising is fundamentally non-standard ad units, but that have far higher performance. And I think work better for the publisher, better economics, they work better for the advertiser. But the challenge is that because they're non-standard, they're hard to scale. And the kind of secret sauce of TripleLift is they figured out how to scale it and create a lot of automation. And today, as I kind of thought about the company, native advertising is, really kind of at the core of a lot of trends in the industry. There's sort of a shift back to quality. There's a shift of dollars to retail media, where I think native advertising and the kind of the capabilities that companies that built native advertising kind of SSPs, really apply there and can help, in particular, native retail media companies sort of manage their offsite advertising. So I thought it was a really interesting company to kind of throw my hat in with. And, I'm in 9 months now, and it's been super fun.
So you said you're an SSP, and then you said you're native advertising, and I think what gets people confused is those sort of circles in the Venn diagram overlap, but there's also a lot of other stuff. So there's an SSP for standard advertising. You're investing a lot in connected TV, in retail media. You acquired a data company. Is it as simple as making it out, or is it complicated?
It is as simple as you make it out. As I've learned the company, it's the company had a period of time where it focused only on native advertising, and then started to add other formats, and now sells everything. But as it's moved to these different categories, we offer, you can buy display from us, just like you can buy from any other SSP, right? And, standard 300 by 250 banner ads, this is more of a commodity format, and the industry's at a point now where it's basically competing on price. I think, though, that what TripleLift has done and what we're continuing to do is when there is the opportunity, we'll take that same native playbook and apply it. So we have created custom formats in CTV as a way for CTV publishers to differentiate. And then we're also focused, I mentioned, on retail media, although very early days for everyone. And there too, I think actually a lot of our kind of existing native capabilities lend themselves to helping those companies. And there's been a lot of enthusiasm around it. And then when you get to the icing on the cake for me was, well before I joined, TripleLift bought OnePlus, which is a first party DMP built by some ex-Googlers, a brilliant team of 50, data scientists out of Zurich. And the idea there was to bake in a solution for our publisher base that enabled publishers to monetize their cookieless audience. And it also just drives more impact. So what we're seeing there is really interesting. If you talk to the big web publishers, they'll tell you their number one problem is that they're monetizing half of their audience at $5 plus. And those are the, Chrome, Android users. And pretty much everyone else, like the other half, mostly Safari, but not just Safari, they're monetizing at 10 cents. We're there already, right?
Right.
And what sort of the magic of OnePlus, of what we now call TripleLift audiences, is publishers can monetize all of it.
And that's through sending signals on the bid stream that say this user is interested in sports or this user is a high value user in some way using first party data.
Yeah. So the founder of OnePlus, Jürgen Galler, really doesn't call it a DMP, he calls it like a data generation engine. So it's, you're taking a little bit of first party seed data, which most publishers have, and then modeling out the rest of them based on, not to be all like buzzwordies, but it is true, machine learning and AI and all that. And I'll just say, because I'm sure this question is coming, there are a lot of solutions like this out in the market for claim to do this, right? Ari, I know you well enough to know that question is coming. What makes this different? I mean, what really makes it different is the results it delivers. And I think a lot of these platforms are not scaled yet. We're just at that stage of development. We really like the results that we're seeing, and we just got to go and sort of tell it to the marketplace.
So one editorial note for anyone who's confused, OnePlus is a totally different company from X plus one, even though they're the same by the transitive property of mathematics. I posted on Threads that I was going to be interviewing you and called for some questions. First question was, tell us about your Cannes installation. People were really impressed with what you guys did at Cannes. I want to hear what it was, and I want to hear how you calculated precisely the ROI of that investment.
First of all, I'm on Threads, but if I guess I had been on it more often, I would have seen that question and could prepare for it.
Is your handle like Dave Clark Photos or something like that?
Well, you have to import your Instagram profile.
Okay, yeah.
And like a lot of people, my Instagram profile is like from my friends and family, and it's locked down, and it's Dave Clark Pics.
Okay, right. Yeah, so I wasn't sure that was you, so I didn't add you.
Yeah.
Everyone follow Dave Clark Pics.
On Twitter, I'm Dave Clark, which sounds like a genius handle, but it's such a common name that I get every Dave Clark, including the guy that was running Amazon.
Oh, yeah, right.
Your question about Cannes. Yeah, so, we decided to sort of underscore, our differentiation is that we help advertisers with creative, and, creative is half the impact of a campaign. And, that's how we differentiate from other SSPs, right? So, and we're not the biggest company out there. So it's we decided to be really creative and get some attention. So we did a couple of things. One is that we had what we called an Imaginarium right on the Croisette. The French government decided to tear up the street in front of it 2 weeks ahead of time. But still, it was, if you were there, it was hot, it was super windy, and it was a place for people to come in and have a lot of fun. And then I think probably the thing you're referring to is we hired a bunch of drummers and dancers who marched up and down the Croisette, just entertaining people all day, and the big crowds formed around it, and it was like street art. It was just a fun thing to do. And as I went around the cocktail circuit at night, it got mentioned a lot. So I feel like there's some pretty good ROI there for a company like ours. We didn't have Skrillex on the beach.
Two questions, Dave. So we're really, as a CEO, how do you think about the ROI of something like that? It's something that everybody, I feel like they struggle with unless they can assign over time, business impact, business uplift, more client spend. And it's a weird attribution problem. How do you think about it?
Yeah, I think you can tie yourself in knots trying to answer the unanswerable question on this one. What matters here is, look, the industry base, the entire ecosystem sort of gathers twice a year in a major way at CES in Cannes. And if you prepare properly, which really means is your team prepared to have the right meetings, and, if you've done your homework and you're going in, you can get a lot of ROI out of that event. I think in this remote world, where most companies are still partially remote, like, it's very hard to fly to see your clients wherever they may be and get the whole senior team around the table because they're not fully back in the office, or you fly to somebody's headquarters in Seattle or San Francisco and they have one executive that's living in Austin, Texas, and they're zooming in. In Cannes, you can do that. CES, you can do that. That's really where the ROI is. I think the marketing is, it's such a noisy ecosystem. If you can just simply explain to people what you do, that's just a huge win. For us, it was really just more about getting attention, talking about drawing people in so we could talk about TripleLift audiences. I think it's just really hard to do in Cannes to kind of break through. Yeah.
Well, look, people were talking about it, right? They asked Ari, so I think mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Practical question on the business. So you mentioned creative, and you're constantly innovating on formats. Do you have like an in-house creative team at TripleLift? Like, how are you helping brands maximize the investment in all these cool formats?
We do, actually. Brands are creating their ads, of course, but native is because what really is happening behind the scenes is it's a component-based system. So we are plugging where we can. We're plugging into asset databases, SKU databases, and compiling an ad in real time. And then we have over 100,000 sort of custom-built, custom-sized ad units across the open web that have been sort of created together with publishers over a decade that are non-standard. And then, we can sort of read the HTML of the web page and understand the style guide and put it all together so that it creates an ad that looks like it belongs there. It's not intrusive, but it's attention getting. And it creates, just much higher click-through rates, 5x or more at least. But along that chain, even though that is all automated, you have some clients who want some hand-holding through that. They may actually want some creative touching work done, and we can do that too. So, it gives us an opportunity to be more like a strategic partner with brands.
So one of the topics we've talked about a lot on this podcast is the collision between SSPs and DSPs that's been going on with Trade Desk getting into the publisher side and Magnite and PubMatic both having buy sides. But TripleLift has always had sort of a bidder and a buy side business as well, probably because the native ads are difficult to execute. Is that still an important part of your business?
Yeah, very much so. And I think it's become increasingly important. We have been very careful to not jump on the resale bandwagon. We do a little bit, like with very carefully curated resellers, but most of our business is direct. We do have our own demand sales team, and a lot of that is because we need to be out sort of explaining the value of native. But I don't think if you talk to the Trade Desk or Google, I don't think any of them would think of us as competitive. In fact, they're probably beneficiaries.
Yeah, one of the things I loved about the founders of TripleLift was that they just didn't respect boundaries between categories. They just did whatever they thought was interesting and could make money. And they came out of AppNexus with like a major chip on their shoulder with something to prove. And they did.
It's funny that you say that because that's what I loved about them too. I mean, the world was kind of telling them that it wasn't going to work. It was one of those kind of classic stories. I think, and they're like this to this day, and very good advisors for me. Because they're like, just stay focused on first principles of what matters for the publisher and the advertiser, and it'll all sort of work out. And once you start gaming the programmatic ecosystem, and that's when you start commodifying and you see it impacting your take rates, and you start to kind of it's like a war of attrition. The battle between supply and sort of SSPs and DSPs is amusing, I think, but sort of like a natural next stage.
Amusing. I'm not sure everyone finds it amusing.
I guess I say that because, how many times have we heard, without naming names, but like the CEOs of either like the major SSPs or DSPs say, we are 100% just the demand side or just the supply side. And oh, by the way, being 100% committed to either side means pushing the other side out of the way so they can build a direct connection to supply and demand, right? Which is a little bit like trying to thread a needle.
Yeah, I still have a copy of the PDF of the Rubicon Manifesto. I put it up on Twitter at some point. So if you need a copy, let me know. Enough about TripleLift. Let's talk about CTV, because you are probably one of the world's experts on CTV, having done it for 5 years at Freewheel. So I kind of want to be sort of pretty open-ended, which is, what are you seeing in CTV? Tell us, give us your wisdom about what's going on in this marketplace.
That's pretty open-ended. And listen, you and I work together at Freewheel. You know there are people who have forgotten more about CTV there than I will ever.
I put worked in quotes, air quotes around work.
It's funny. I would put air quotes in work too. But I think our expectations were aligned when you came in, and Beeswax. I will say Beeswax was a brilliant acquisition for Freewheel.
I'll be delivering your bag of cash later today.
I think it goes the other way around. So CTV, I mean, I don't know where to start. I think I have always felt that there's a misunderstanding of how CTV fundamentally works in the digital media industry. People talk about CTV as it's like the marriage of analog and digital, or old media and new media. It's it's like chocolate and the peanut butter kind of thing coming together. To some degree that's true, but I think what's less understood is that CTV is more a derivative of linear television in its fundamentals than it is of open web programmatic advertising world. And specifically, you have different supply demand dynamics. There's a lot more power with suppliers in CTV than you have on the open web, because it's a handful of companies that really dominate in a supply constrained world. It's hard to just manufacture more supply in order to kind of make your numbers, right? And that kind of changes everything. I think there's a long list, and we won't name names, but you know who they are. There's a long list of kind of companies that have been birthed out of open web programmatic who have made plays in CTV, and it hasn't gone well. And I think it's because they kind of fundamentally haven't understood that dynamic, and then really the need to respect, both sides of the table, of course, but but I think those sorts of companies come in already respecting the demand side, but having less respect for the power of the supply side.
Right. So NBC and Discovery and those companies just control a huge amount of the quality CTV inventory. You have web-based video, which is often sold as CTV, but the quality stuff is really locked down.
Exactly. I mean, NBC has huge market power. It's YouTube and YouTube TV, if you classify that as CTV, and I think it can, that's, that's the 40% or something. But then the next, then it goes Hulu, it's Disney, it's NBC, not just Peacock, but they have a lot of CTV outlets, Paramount, Pluto is part of that. It's Fox with Tubi, it's Comcast with Xumo. It's the big traditional media companies that have a lot of the inventory, because they're really setting the pace of, how the industry sort of evolves. They have a lot more control over things. There are some problems with that too. It's much harder to get standardization across these audience pools than, it's not as simple as Google coming in and just sort of mandating how things are going to work, which I know I'm oversimplifying. But if you look at measurement, or, advertisers would love to have an identity layer where it's standard taxonomies across audience pools. It's very hard to do because, the major publishers are in control of their data, and, want to be in control of their supply too.
Right. So what's the conversation at a place like NBC, or NBC, not saying what they actually say? What do they say when they're thinking about how they should approach the programmatic enablement of CTV inventory?
At a simplest level, and I think first the thing to understand is NBC has become pretty sophisticated, and they have one SSP, Freewheel, and their umpteen DSPs, the Trade Desk at the top of the list. They have built a programmatic ecosystem. I think they are very careful about balancing their direct sold inventory with their programmatic inventory, and even kind of letting it compete against each other. They are working really hard on making their linear inventory addressable and behave more like digital inventory, and then combining that with their digital inventory and selling it as one audience pool. I mean, that's really this is a long journey, but they sort of, NBC sort of proclaimed a few years ago in their one 21 event that it's going to be, you're going to be able to come in and buy sort of like all NBC properties. And then I think like, then the next phase is, does NBC have enough market power that it could start representing smaller players that may be in decline and, want to maximize their OpEx by sort of turning their sales over to a company like NBC that has a lot of market power.
And they announced at Cannes this really interesting announcement that sounded like you can use NBC's platform to buy other freewheel supplier inventory. Instead of freewheel being like the center of a marketplace, it sounded from that announcement, I don't know if you read it, that it was more like NBC becomes the center of the marketplace and you're accessing freewheel publishers.
I did see that. And, to be honest with you, I don't have like clarity on exactly what that meant functionally. I just haven't been able to dig into the homework. But that like a big supporter of Freewheel's acquisition of Beeswax was NBC because they wanted to see the bidder built into MRM so they could buy supply.
Right. MRM being the Freewheel ad service.
Sorry. Right.
I thought it was just because Linda and I are BFFs.
Yeah?
No,
Are you
kidding?
So not after you moved over to Threads.
I know, but she's not following me on Threads. I don't know what's going on there. Also, just an editorial note, with one of the most popular videos on Marketecture TV is my interview with Prashant Bhatia, who is the president of NBC and has been at the forefront of many of these efforts. So you mentioned identity. The Trade Desk, who we always talk about on the show, is staking a pretty big part of their future on this idea that they're going to get UID2 adopted throughout the CTV ecosystem. Do you think that's going to happen?
Ari, I listen to Marketecture because I want to understand if this is going to happen or not. Like truly, I don't know. I mean, there's like a bull and a bear case on this one, I think, and I don't know which one is. The bull case is that Trade Desk brings a lot of demand to the table, and that means a lot of leverage. The bear case is what I said before, is that you have publishers who, like, they're never going to let go of control of their supply. And in the CTV world, that means decisioning, right? So they're going to go carefully, I think. And there's some, big forecasts from the Trade Desk as to where that's going to be in a year from now or whatever. And I don't know if they're pacing towards that, but I think we're going to have to see. I think there's like a tension between those two things.
You're playing this back. You seem to be in the camp, and that's what words in your mouth that it won't happen, right? Just given the supply sized leverage in controlling and sort of wanting to maximize their own yield. Yes,
I really don't know, Eric. Like, this could be one of those things where CTV publishers really like Trade Desk, right? And where we're going through a process of like iteration of on what it is and how it works and the terms around UID and the actual degree of openness that Trade Desk sort of provides, those sorts of things. So to a point where everybody's happy, and we're just sort of like working through it now. I don't have sort of privy to what's in anybody's sort of head on and how they're thinking about it. But I do think, again, as I've said, I think the big CTV publishers are going to go slow and are going to be super careful, and they have the luxury of that.
That makes sense. Not to bounce around, subtopics, broadly CTV, but then identity back to formats. Given like how TripleLift is, so focused on innovating our formats, how CTV is inherently new, albeit supply side constrained, do you see a future where, the typical 6-second, 15-second, 30-second goes away in CTV? And if so, what do you think the format of the future looks like? I think a lot about this. We're making investments, in this. There was an interesting announcement between Roku.
We're going to definitely talk about that.
Yeah. But just, we're just sort of like stuck in standard forever because it's scalable, or, things are going to flip and be completely different.
No, I think it's all of the above. First of all, I think that anybody that tells you that the 30-second spot is dead is wrong. It's a beautiful thing. There was a book that came out like in the 2000s that said the 30-second spot was dead. So it's been, 20 years of being wrong. Because, look, I mean, it works. Consumers have said that they're willing to put up with it in exchange for lower subscription fees. So there's a lot of voting going on there. It really works for brands. It's like stop motion. I go on it. I can tell my story in 30 seconds. It's a pretty powerful thing. And look, the industry has spent the last 5 or 10 years plowing a lot of capital into just getting the 30-second spot to work at a scalable way across the industry. There's still work to do. Like, we're still working on just measurement and some basic things. So I think, though, at the same time, what is also true is audiences in CTV environments are far less tolerant of interruption than they are in linear environments. That's a big driver over to IP environments. And for most streamers today, they're not profitable, they're losing money, and they have to sort of change up, revenue per user. And one way to do it is through there are a lot of ways to do it, but one way to do it is through innovative ad formats, which are less interruptive, can win you higher CPMs, but probably are married with 30-second spot that might be a pre-roll or mid-roll, kind of work together for the brand. In fact, a lot of the research says that where these innovative ad formats, like in TripleLift's case, we can do like 3D or 2D product insertion or billboard insertion into the live stream itself programmatically. We just announced that with Peacock. But we also have a library of other kind of innovative squeeze backs and things like that. When you marry that with a standard pre-roll or mid-roll is where it really works and sort of deliver you're driving a little brand lift. So I think it's kind of an all of the above thing. And if you listen to like what the Netflix team is saying, like Greg Peters has been out talking about this, and Peter Naylor and so on, that, where Netflix is going to differentiate in the ad market is on innovative ad formats, because they can, they're essentially like a total control over their audience data, the platform, the user interface, and all that stuff.
Yep. So I wanted to, if you'll just indulge me, a little trip down memory lane here, because the first time we met, you were at a company that probably most of the youngins listening to this have never heard of, called Joost. And I would just love you to explain, why did everyone care so much about Joost when it was out?
Joost was like the hottest company in the world for 10 minutes.
It was.
So what was Joost first, for those who don't know? Joost was kind of Hulu before Hulu. It was a company I sort of was like a quasi-founder of, but the real founders were the founders of Skype and then Kazaa before that. So Joost was a peer-to-peer video platform that was started in like 2006. It was actually started before YouTube was sold to Google. And the state of video on the web at the time was like, YouTube was capping videos at 11 minutes, and they would stutter and buffer, and they were like pixelated. And because of the peer-to-peer code that drove Skype, which was like real stress-tested scaled peer-to-peer code, we could stream like movies in high def, right? I was like, what we ended up doing was sort of kind of following the iTunes playbook. And like, if we could build a platform where premium content creators could kind of list their content, and then we would pull it together into a single user interface, which at the time, the idea was to have it be completely ad supported, not subscription based. And a lot of these concepts about like innovative ad formats and what you can do with targeting and all that kind of stuff, like, haven't changed one bit. Like, it was part of the original Joost. We were in stealth for a while, and I don't know, it just was such a big idea that when we came out of stealth, the world went nuts. And honestly, like, I can tell you from the inside, it was like very hard for us to handle it. And there was a big hype cycle around the company. Back then you didn't have internet on planes, and I would grab a bunch of magazines at like at the airport and read them. And like a startup, you're lucky if you have like one article and it's coming. I would flip through 10 magazines and read 10 articles about us, and I didn't even know that we were on the cover of Wired and all this kind of stuff. It was insane. We had like venture capital firms cold calling our thing and people wanting to come work. It was nuts. But by the way, that was also part of the problem. Like, I can talk to you about, I think I probably learned more in my 3 years, it was 3 years that I was there, if I was there from the first day to the last day, essentially. When the 2009 market crash, we ended up sort of selling it for scrap at Coney. But after raising like over $100 million and, being sort of darling.
I was just so awestruck trying to sell you an ad server. And I don't know if you ended up not using our ad server. I can't remember.
Well, the story for ad tech historians, Ari, is I was we tried to build our own ad server. That didn't work. I came to you to figure out if DoubleClick would work, and was sorely disappointed because DoubleClick just wasn't ready for video, in particular premium video, where you have like a mid-roll and, all this. And then somebody told me about these guys that were working out of the Battery Ventures office in San Francisco named John Heller and Doug Knopper, and that I should go talk to them because they were working on something like this. So I flew out there, and like on a whiteboard, John Heller, these two are the founders together with Diane Yu, CTO, all like stoic, like, right, of Freewheel. And they were like, we've been looking forward to meeting you because we emailed you 6 months ago about coming and working at Joost and nobody responded. Oh, we went off and started this company. And I was like, oh, you suckers. And they went on to create Freewheel. And John went to the whiteboard and just explained what was different about premium video from an ad serving perspective. And just like in one fell swoop, just solved all of our problems. And we said, we want to be your kind of guinea pig trial. So we kind of we were their first client and developed, sort of co-developed Freewheel along the way. We were there.
It's a good story. John loves a whiteboard. You can't even be in a room with him on a whiteboard without him using it.
He's a big brain for sure.
All right, let's take a quick break and do the news of the week. All right, so this just dropped. You may not have read it yet, but it's very relevant to our conversation, which is a press release from Freewheel that they and Roku have a partnership. It appears to be mostly an interop deal. So it appears to be that Roku demand is going to flow into the Freewheel ad server owned marketplace, and Freewheel ad server clients are going to be able to use Roku signals to target ads. But this is kind of a big deal. This is something that I think, Dave, you and I talked about a bunch a couple years ago. Any thoughts on this?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? It is something we talked about. And, you know, the Freewheel's always had a good relationship with Roku, but, you know, a lot of built a lot of their ad stack in-house. So I think this feels like a big breakthrough for both parties.
Yeah, I mean, it helps to take the perspective of, say, a publisher like an NBC, where you have your own app on different platforms, and in some cases, those platforms have ad sales rights. So Roku might have the ability to sell some ads in the NBC app on the Roku device, and that causes all kinds of integration headaches and complexities and conflicting ads and competitive exclusions and things like that. So this deal seems to take a big step to solve those problems.
Yes, and you know that was sort of part of the magic of Freewheel originally. It was understanding that you had this sort of like complexity of sales rights, which are like, again, CTV is more a derivative of TV. Like this is like legacy cable industry stuff, right? Where they're ad split. And, you know, I would say Roku's interest in this is supporting their publishers more, right? So they're essentially content suppliers are super important to them. And their content suppliers care a lot about that kind of integration and having control over the inventory that they are contractually obligated, you know, sort of entitled to. And this will make it easier for them. And that will ultimately I think that benefit ultimately accrues back to Roku.
Yeah, it's worth reading the full release for those interested in this stuff, because there's a lot here. And I think to Ari's point, it's largely about sort of like interoperability. The one thing that's interesting here is there's inventory quality.
Oh yeah.
Where they're working with human security to, you know, hopefully minimize like invalid traffic and all that stuff that, you know, seems to be increasingly of concern for CTV. So I think it's a good thing. It probably sort of like sets both companies ahead of the pack. There's a lot of good stuff. It was like a clean room spin.
Roku's definitely one of the most spoofed publisher platforms out there in CTV. There's tons of fake Roku inventory. So I think that's why they did this human deal like a year ago.
Smart. Yeah, that's true. And it largely just size their footprint, right? So this is great.
While we're on video, there's continued fallout from the Google Video Network report from Adlytics. So Adweek is reporting that many buyers are starting to turn off the network portions of their YouTube buys or doing other things to try to cut back on their off-network video stuff. You think this is going to blow over? Maybe Eric, you give it a shot. You think it's going to blow over, or like every other scandal, or is this going to stick?
I'll take the over that it blows over. I think there'll probably be some make goods, probably be some, you know, changes in terms of like the visibility of certain options, and things go back. Because if you read this piece, it was a well-written piece and it was quite long. You know, they talk about how there's varying percentages of buys that were going towards the video network. Was it called GVP?
Google Video GVN?
Yeah. Read the article, right? So it starts with 90% of my ads were going, then it was, you know, low single digits, but, you know, it goes down and talks a various, you know, subset of buyers, and some of them were bemoaning how this is going to lead to degradation in performance, and if, you know, performance is the reason why a lot of buyers are using this combined network product. I think ultimately it ends up being figured out, but they have to get their handle around the really bad stuff that they've shown a light on. The MFA sites, the sound off, autoplay, like all of that stuff needs to be addressed and addressed fast. So it blows over, but hopefully with some positive strides in the meantime.
Dave, any thoughts on this?
Totally agree. I think I've gone around and asked around on this, and I think people feel like this is sort of manageable. That Google's on it, frankly, and we'll get through it.
All right. So last week, when we spoke to Nandini from Check My Ads, we had a discussion about precise location data and how it was, a major problem, but could it be anonymized? And this week, Massachusetts is the first state that's looking to totally ban the use of precise location data. So sale and usage of that for advertising, which is pretty aggressive, but, probably the right thing to do. I'm going to kind of come out with my point of view that I've said previously, which is I think there's really no way to make precise location data safe. But it kind of speaks to what we talked about 2 weeks ago with Alan Chappell, which is the United States now has this incredibly complicated patchwork of rules and regulations that's very difficult to deal with. So
from a technical perspective, could companies just, block Massachusetts? I feel like we talked about that with Alan as this could be a way that this, ultimately happens. Like, is it as simple as that if something like this happens? And then also, can something like this happen on a state basis?
Well, if you have precise location data, you can block Massachusetts.
Yeah, exactly. You have to use the data to block.
Exactly. It's possible. Would they actually do it? And would this, unfortunately, Alan's not here. Does something like this happen on a state level? Those are the two questions.
Yeah, there are companies whose business model is entirely precise long data, like 360, which is an application that a lot of parents use to keep track of their kids. Their business model is entirely selling your location data, and I guess it's relatively easy for them to just not sell any ads in Massachusetts, not collect any data in Massachusetts. But that's going to make it harder and harder for people to comply with these things.
Yeah. The government is a big customer of a lot of these businesses too. So it's
true.
It's an interesting catch-22 position that, this just leads everything into.
So last topic, Adweek had an interesting article saying that ad tech jobs are cratering. So jobs are down 60%. New job listings are down 60% over the past year since June 22. Eric, you have a portfolio full of companies hiring. Dave, you running a scaled ad tech business. I'd love to hear what you're seeing in the hiring market. Maybe Eric first.
So I read the piece, and I wish there were numbers rather than percentages.
Right.
Percentages, no numbers. Like I'd love to show no raw numbers. I remember at the peak, like TTD had something like 600 both racks, and I was like tweeting about this stuff. It was pretty crazy. With the unfortunate shutdown of MediaMath, one of the things that we did was did a sort of like quick scrape across all the companies in the portfolio to create a database of jobs that we can connect relevant people to. So we have in the portfolio to open on pages 130 job openings. It's pretty interesting. It's a wide variety of companies, as you can imagine. It's in the spaces that are growing fast, so it's like identity and sort of like MarTech and AI and CTV, so on and so forth. So there's companies hiring out there, and they're hiring a bunch of positions. It's just a matter of like there's just less jobs open than there was.
You heard it here. You just text Eric, text his cell phone if you need a job in ad tech. So I'll give you the number.
Your number's out there, Fubba.
My number's out there. Yeah. Dave, what are you saying?
We're hiring and growing, but I think, look, generally 2021, 22 was like an insane, like 50-year peak of the industry. And there was just a ton of overbuilding in ad tech. And now I think that actually created a lot of like diffusion of responsibility within the companies. You just can't add people that quickly and be operationally efficient. And now the tide has sort of gone out, and a lot of companies are, really just focusing on like cleaning that up and operational efficiency. And we're not alone, and we're kind of like doing both at the same time as we kind of reorient our strategy. And then the other big trend is, there's this like flight to quality now, and I think a lot of the kind of more kind of point solution or commoditized companies out there that get themselves into trouble, like Media Math, may kind of shake out of the ecosystem, and that's going to create, a tightening of roles and availability. But like, look, I mean, if you're talented in this industry, there's tons of opportunity for you.
Is TripleLift up or down on headcount since the private equity acquisition?
Meaningfully up since the private equity acquisition, both because of the growth of the company and the acquisition of 1+X.
Oh, right. 1+X, yeah.
But, you can see this in the press, like, we cut back in Q1 just to kind of like right size the business, because I think, TripleLift wasn't alone in, explosive growth in 20 and 21.
Right. I'm sorry, one last question I forgot to ask you earlier, Dave. Were you affected by the Media Math bankruptcy? Were you left holding the bag?
We're working through that now. And, but yeah, we were like, it's all public. We were like the 6th or 7th SSP on the list. Yeah. I will say that this is like the genius of your friends, Eric Berry and company. It's that they saw this coming like a long time ago and put a lot of kind of governors in place at TripleLift so that when the day eventually came, we wouldn't be that exposed.
Yeah. So, are you going to claw back from publishers?
We're debating that now. I think we're going to watch and see what the larger SSPs do and probably follow suit. And we're talking to our publishers right now. There might be some like middle ground.
Right.
I guess what Gum put out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw that. And they get a lot of praise from publishers, quite frankly, but I think we're probably talking about very different numbers.
Yeah.
They also have all that dental revenue to fall back on. Good to be diversified. All right, this was awesome.
Look, Threads. We got to end on Threads.
Okay, Threads. Are you still using Threads, Eric?
I'm playing around with it. It's fun. It reminds me of the beginnings of Twitter. It reminds me of the beginnings of social networking. There's like cool communities that are easily forming on there around like interests, and I give it a thumbs up so far.
Dave?
My first reaction was, it is so hard to create. It's like a cold start problem, like, creating a new, no matter how flawed Twitter may be, it's just so hard to recreate everything that's on there. So my first reaction was, I think the story is going to be that Threads just made Twitter better because they have some competition and now need it. But then I saw like Elon's tweets this week and I was like, oh, maybe not. So I don't know. I'm on both and we'll see what happens. And, I think everybody in the industry is rooting for Linda Yagorino, right? So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm sort of alternating posts, a little Twitter, a little Threads. Threads I find more fun, and Twitter is more informative. So it's a little angry, but information makes people angry. But yeah, you should follow me on Threads. You should follow Dave, as we discussed, Eric, and also follow Marketecture TV. After last week, I called out that people should follow Marketecture TV, and now we have like 50 followers. So that's a real great start. I encourage you to follow it. All right, let's call it. So, Dave, thank you so much for being here. This was an awesome conversation. There is actually, by the way, a TripleLift interview on Marketecture TV where we go into some depth on what the company is and what it does. So I'd recommend watching that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.